everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the KeenGamer podcast. I'm your host, Mark Callahan from this multiverse or universe, plural and singular, I know. But we have a special episode for you as we will be reviewing Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Please welcome us from this universe, Jessica Orr. Jessica, how you doing?
I'm actually from a different universe. I should have told you that before the start of the show. I apologize. I've derailed us already. Who are
Oh,
you?
trust me. It's like
In my
how
universe, yeah, in my universe, it's a host called Kyle Shamallard.
Oh yeah, my universe used to have a guy named Tristan. I love you, Tristan. And it's kind of like how each universe, Doctor Strange has something in common with all of them. It's like each universe, I always derail the podcast, which I have to apologize to our other panelists, Daniel. How you doing?
I'm not Dark Daniel. I'm just normal Daniel. Dark Daniel's busy, so he's away doing stuff with his third eye and stuff.
Is other universes of you who are like, you know what? I like our corporate overloads.
Yeah, maybe.
I love
maybe,
Fallout 76.
Maybe
Yeah.
there's some capitalist pod, Tory voting version of Daniel out there somewhere. I hope not, because if there is, I'm going to track him down and kill him the way that when this movie. Yeah, no spoilers.
That's Stark Daniel.
He deserves it.
So as we said from the top, it is a very special episode because we will be talking all about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which, that is a mouthful to say, FYI. So the first half of this podcast, we are strictly no spoilers. We are treating you like you have not even, a little bit of the trailers, but we're going to keep it very minimum. But we'll give you a timestamp or just at a point, Jessica, you can work your magic. See, that's a play on words because he used magic. And then after that, we will go heavy on spoilers. Again, first half, no spoilers. We got you saved. After that, you're on your own. So I think we should just start out. Jessica, it's kind of like a two-way question of what is your familiarity with Doctor Strange? And because Sam Raimi is such a significant part of this movie, because he is the director, what do you think? What is your history of Sam Raimi?
My history of Doctor Strange is just I have seen the first film. I like the first film. I like Doctor Strange's appearances in the MCU, but my only experience of him in comics is when he kind of crosses over to some stuff that I read. Like I read Captain Marvel, I read some of the Avengers stuff. He's there. I've never read a Doctor Strange comic before. I'd be open for suggestions if anybody has, because he's an awesome character. I love the cosmic and the magic side of the MCU. So I'm down for reading some Doctor Strange comics. My history of Raimi is actually like I'm a big horror movie fan, but I haven't seen like all of his horror movies. So I've seen Evil Dead 2, Drag Me to Hell. I haven't seen The Darkness yet. But I used to love Drag Me to Hell. I watched it recently and it didn't hold up all too well for me. Still love Evil.
Really?
Yeah, still love Evil Dead though, and I still think he's a great director. He's got such a unique style, like when you're watching a Raimi movie, So I was pretty excited. Yeah, not too much history of Doctor Strange, and actually not as much history as I'd like to with Sam Raimi.
Two things. One, if you got to read a Doctor Strange comic, I recommend The Oath.
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Writing it down.
I think like that is like the go-to. It's like what Batman comic should I read? Like year one? Not in terms of like origin, but like that is like the gold standard of Doctor Strange for me. So definitely that. And two, what part of Drag Me to Hell didn't you like?
Maybe I have to watch it again. You're not supposed to like the main character, but I really hate her. I love all like, the horror elements and the gross out stuff with with the lady. Like that's totally fine. It wasn't as fun for me as the first time around. I remember seeing it in the cinema the first time around. I rarely went to the cinema with a group of my friends in school, but I was like, just shut up and let me watch this film. This is awesome. Stop talking. Go away. I don't know. It just didn't click with me this time around. Still love all his directorial styles and the gross out moments.
Love it. Well, I think it's called Gore Stick. It's like slapstick and gore. Gore Stick.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's not even a joke. That is actually like a Sam Raimi
Ism.
method. But
Makes
we'll
a
get
lot
to
of
that when
sense.
I talk about me. Daniel, what is your history with A, Doctor Strange, and B, Sam Raimi?
So with Doctor Strange, I'm quite similar to Jessica. The only Doctor Strange book I've read is The Oath. The Oath is a fantastic graphic novel, but it's the only volume of that character that I've read. I do enjoy him when he crops up in Spider-Man stories and in Avenger stories, and kind of crossover things like that. He's a really good kind of tertiary character in the comics for me, but he's never really been a central character for me in terms of the source material. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Cumberbatch's take on him so far in the MCU. I think it's quite fascinating that this is only the second Doctor Strange movie. Like when you consider how much growth that character has had between. I went back and recently rewatched the first movie in anticipation for this one last week to see him kind of grow for that, obnoxious up himself surgeon to what he goes through in Infinity War and Endgame and being snapped and coming back and then going into this film, No Way Home, etc. Yeah, it's been a really interesting arc for him. And in terms of Sam Raimi, I am a massive fan. I've grown up watching Sam Raimi. I love the Evil Dead movies. That's actually not 100% true. I have not seen Ash versus Evil Dead, so that's a bit of a hole in my Sam Raimi knowledge. But those first three Evil Dead films, the first two in Army of Darkness, I love those films. I love the Darkman movies. Well, I've only to be honest, I've seen the first Darkman movie and some of the second one, which I don't think Sam Raimi actually directed, but starring Liam Neeson. So yeah, the first Darkman was a solid kind of original superhero dark horror-ish story, and I love Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films that Sam Raimi made. The third one's questionable, but those first two movies were phenomenal masterpieces. So yeah, big Raimi fan, and very excited for this movie, and very pleased with the outcome of the Sam Raimi-ness in this movie.
Totally. I mean, Doctor Strange for me, like, of course, I knew about the character, but just to see, I mean, always in comics popping up, but until like recently, right before Cumberbatch first appeared in his own solo Doctor Strange, that was like, all right, let's look at like his stories, and they're pretty good. And I think more of Doctor Strange isn't really about the story of what I immediately think; it's more about the visuals, which is why a big part of me, like, I know everyone said like it looked too much like Inception of how like the city folds in on itself.
Mm.
I get that, but when he first like trips out,
Mhm.
I haven't tripped, but like he just all the trippy stuff, like little baby hands, and then they like attach to his face. It's like, oh my god, it's
And then the
awesome.
form of Doctor Strange with the hands, yeah.
Yes, and then he flies through it or something. Like it's. Do not watch that while you're high. I made that mistake, kids. I actually did. First night in this apartment, God bless your soul, Uncle Ward. He was like, hey, here's an edible brownie. I made it myself. I'm like, oh, thanks. I don't really dabble into that stuff. And he gave it to a couple of my family members. And I'm like, holy shit. Oh my God. And I'm like, oh my God, no. And it wasn't even the movie. It was a Collider. It's like top 50 superhero movies. And it was just a clip. And I'm like, oh, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And then I'm talking to everyone like else. I'm like, was that strong for you guys? And they've taken a lot more. And they're like, yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my Ben and Jerry's like Swedish fish, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But we're not here to talk about my questionable decisions. Okay, it's legal in New York, so suck it. Anyway, but Sam Raimi, of course, I got introduced to him through Spider-Man. And what's interesting is like when I first saw Spider-Man, it was like, oh, well, that's like style of movies. But then like I got older, I'm like, no, that's a Sam Raimi movie. And it was back before, I believe it was Homecoming. I watched the Raimi movies all in a row, and I'm like, wow, there is so much Sam Raimi-ness in this that I'm like, this is so unique. And like, because a big part of the MCU is like, granted, there's James Gunn, there's Chloe Zhao putting their own stamp on it, but they kind of feel like not as distinct. The other movies, like we bagged on Thor: The Dark World, and yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Sorry. But of course, Evil Dead 2, I mean, the first Evil Dead, not, I mean, it is memorable, is a classic, but Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, Darkman, you mentioned, Dan. I love Drag Me to Hell. Maybe I'll watch it again. Maybe it'll be like, eh. But come on,
It is,
Demonic Goats.
Drag Me to Hell is I still like it. It's my least favorite Sam Raimi film, I must admit. I still enjoy it, but of his movies, it's probably at the bottom for me.
Really? Not Oz the Great and Powerful?
Forgot about that one. Okay, yeah, it's probably great, powerful. Forgot about that Franco movie. That's right. Yeah, fair enough.
I like parts of that. Like, I like it because I saw it with my dad and he really enjoyed it. So I'm like, okay, I like it. But if he watched it again, he'd be like, oh well. Other than that, oh, by the way, Ash versus Evil Dead, phenomenal.
Okay.
And
I
oh
actually
my
haven't
gosh,
seen it
there's
yet either. It's like every time I'm like, oh, you need to watch. It's got Lucy Lawless in it as well, and like it's like made for me to watch, and I still haven't seen it.
And Bruce Campbell, by
Mhm.
God.
Like he comes back, yeah. Raimi came back, like yeah. I really need to see it.
I love Sam Raimi. I love his brother Ted Raimi. I love Bruce Campbell. And also Evil Dead game coming out this month.
Yeah, excited for that.
Big time to be a Raimi fan.
Yeah.
So again, we're still no spoilers, so don't fret. Guys, what was your expectations before the movie? And how did you feel coming out? Dan, let's start with you.
So I was worried, like you kind of alluded to, Mark, I was worried that being an MCU movie at this point, frankly, somewhat they're movies by committee. There's quite formulaic, there's a Marvel formula that they'll follow. We all know the situation with Edgar Wright leaving Ant-Man because he was being stifled creatively. I was worried that when Scott Derrickson left, who again solid director, I like Sinister, and I'm looking forward to The Black Phone. Solid horror director. When he left the project, I was a wee bit worried, and then they said they were bringing in Sam Raimi, and that was around the same time I believe that the Toby and Andrew rumours were swirling surrounding No Way Home. So I think a lot of folk kind of jumped to conclusions, put two and two together, like, oh, they're bringing in Raimi because they're going to bring back Toby, and blah blah blah. Yeah, so to see Sam Raimi's name on it, I was immediately excited, and then the trailers came out, and although I was looking forward to it, there was a wee part in the back of my head going, is this just going to be a generic Marvel movie with Sam Raimi's name slapped on it? But thankfully, no. This is essentially maybe not a full-blown Sam Raimi movie, but for a lot of it, it is. It's a full-blown Sam Raimi horror film that happens to star Doctor Strange, and I was extremely pleased with that outcome. That is what I was hoping for. I did expect more multiverse stuff and more cameos personally, partly because that got quite hyped up. I think it was around the time of No Way Home, or maybe just before that. It was obviously the cameos, and that were a huge deal, and that was kind of what the movie was kind of crafted around, were the cameos. Here, I heard they were doing reshoots and they were going to do more cameos and things like that. So I was really expecting it to be, you were going to see folk like Wolverine, in the background of one multiverse, and maybe Spider-Man swinging by in one universe, and maybe like Toby Spider-Man, swinging by in his own version of New York. I thought we were going to see more things like that. But coming out, I wasn't disappointed that we didn't, because it was a full-fledged Sam Raimi horror film. Therefore, that made up for the, if you can call it, a lack of like multiversal cameos. I would rather have a true Sam Raimi horror film than a movie full of, oh, there's Daniel Radcliffe as Wolverine, there's, all these kind of fan-casted characters. I would much rather just have a good, creative, slightly different movie. I mean, I would say this movie is quite inconsistent with the rest of the MCU, but for me, that's a good thing. I think a lot of folk are seeing that as a negative. I've heard that said as a negative. At this point, after Endgame, the Marvel movies have had their triumph. They've had their big blockbuster, their build-up, their quote-unquote finale. At this point, I believe they should be taking more risks like this. They should be letting creative people come in and make their own story based on these characters, because then you get, exciting, creative, new, fresh-feeling movies like this, rather than the 30th Marvel movie in a franchise, that we're all kind of expecting. I was quite happy to have the rug pulled from under me in this movie, although I can see why, if you're not a massive Raimi fan, or if you're not expecting that going in, you're just going to see a Marvel movie, you might feel a bit cheated, a bit disappointed, because this is really quite different. But I loved it personally because of my fandom of Sam Raimi.
Well said, Jessica. What about you?
So I did that thing. I'm sure you all do it too, where you set your expectations sky high, and then you inevitably get disappointed. I was not disappointed by this movie, even though it was not. Don't worry. This was not the movie I thought it was going to be, but I
Mhm.
still really enjoyed it, and you know what? I enjoyed it a lot more. Like what Dan said, judging from the trailers and judging from the build-up of like WandaVision and what happened in Loki with the multiverse getting blown up, I expected like cameos. I heard the rumors about the reshoots as well, about how they wanted to add more cameos, and I was like, oh, so this is going to be like Spider-Man No Way Home, like on steroids, like cameo. That's what I was expecting. So I was really excited for a bunch of cameos, and I was really excited for Wanda to have like a proper full-fledged role in a movie. And I got a Wanda story, not one I was expecting, and I got not as many cameos as I was hoping and wanting for. Honestly, like I told you, I wasn't really like I like Raimi. I think he's a really good director, but haven't seen a lot of his stuff. So I forgot to mention that I did like Spider-Man 1 and 2, particularly 2. I watched it recently before No Way Home. Man, does that hold up? Like
Oh,
what
big
a
time.
fantastic movie, not just a superhero movie. Like the emotional beats in that, incredible. And the directing, so good. So yeah, it was kind of like an afterthought that Sam Raimi was there. And coming out of this, I'm like, man, that was a Sam Raimi film. That was so awesome. I love the stuff they did with Wanda. I liked Doctor Strange, but he was like it was good that he was there, and it was good like visual stuff, and the magic scenes always awesome. I love Doctor Strange for that. Like in Infinity War when he has the fight with Thanos, so cool. This movie has some pretty good magic scenes in it as well. So yeah, expectations up here, and they actually managed to meet it for completely different reasons than what I was hyped for the movie going in.
You see, I'm very similar to you guys, but different. And so I go in the introduction of my review the concept of the multiverse, and it's always a big thing in comics, but I feel like now it's going more mainstream. And there's always like alternative reality stories, like what if like the Nazis won World War II? That's always a popular trope. But now it's hard to pinpoint, but I say Into the Spider Verse. I mean, it did good money, but the critical acclaim, and then it's like, ooh, Arrowverse. Like you guys got to give, well, not you guys, but like fans have to give big credit, whatever you think of the show. And if you guys don't know Crisis on Infinite Earths, it is like a massive crossover in the comics that involves all these different Earths and realities. And through the Arrowverse, it was a 5-show crossover. It's hard to do a 2-show crossover, but 5 shows and all these different cameos, like Brandon Routh returned as Superman, Tom Welling, Smallville, all these crazy things. So I feel like you guys got to give big credit for that. I'll always like stand in my soapbox. But of course, MCU is a lot bigger. So No Way Home happened. And by the way, we're not going to spoil Doctor Strange. We're going to spoil No Way Home.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we already did. Andrew and Toby and my boy, I hope he's my boy, Matt Murdock. He came back. But yet again, I mean, well, Matt Murdock was like a cute like cameo to establish, but like Andrew and Toby weren't cameos to me. They were like supporting roles, emotional beats. It wasn't like, hey, you like this? Boom. You like this character? Boom. You like this? Boom. And I'm like, that was my biggest fear going into this. Like, I heard about the cameos. I'm like, oh no, this. I know it's a multiverse, but I don't want that. The Flash movie will be a multiverse movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm excited for that. Not for Ezra Miller. They's messed up. Michael Keaton, yeah, I'm excited for that one. But and then I'll watch the trailers. Like it looks great, but I'm like, all right, I'm excited, but I'm not like No Way Home excited, where I'm looking over and over at the trailers. And then the social media embargo was released, and all the comments were like, yeah, not enough cameos. It's a full blown Sam Raimi horror movie. I'm like, what? What? And then all of a sudden, like, I'm excited for this. And now I'm like, I'm counting down the minutes. And guess what? What everyone said, it's true. And yes, there is cameos. We'll talk a lot about that in the spoiler section. But all of the twists and turns, and this is a Sam Raimi style dripping movie. And you brought up a good point, Dan, of Scott Derrickson. Is
Derek,
that's a yes. So when this movie was announced at Hall H back in 2019, Kevin Feige, I went back to watch this. He was like, "This will be Marvel's first scary movie," and I'm like, "You sure? Okay, I'm gonna trust you." And it's like, we're getting rid of a horror director over creative differences. I'm like, oh, they never said what the differences were. I'm like, oh, maybe he wanted it too scary, and Marvel's like, not that much. But I'm like, okay, they brought Sam Raimi. And keep in mind, the last movie he directed was Oz the Great and Powerful back in 2013. It's 2022. So I'm like, okay, I hope it's not like a Ron Howard situation with like Solo when he came in, as in like, I want his own stamp on it. And man, I got what I wanted. And that never happens in any of the universes I visited. Even though I did want my Red Sox bet. Whoop whoop. Can't wait to lose it. Boop boop. So, Jessica, without going to spoilers, and we mentioned the Sam Raimi-ness of it, you like the Wanda story. What else did you like about it?
I kind of like we're talking about like, oh yeah, it's a Raimi ass movie, like it's horror stuff. I've seen some stuff online going like, oh, this is too much. Well, like what was your previous horror that you've seen? Like this is like Sam Raimi doesn't do like terrifying, like tingling horror. He does like camp 80s 90s sort of horror, like really well directed, but it's like maybe cut to a jump scare, but like I can't like if a kid goes and see it, it's like, yeah, I think maybe a jump scare or two will get them. It's not horrible body horror, gruesome imagery, It's
No,
it's
it's not
just
super bloody like his movies.
yeah.
And you mentioned Spider-Man 2. I just watched this
Well,
like
Evil Dead is filled with blood.
oh well, I'm talking about like Spider-Man, like movie,
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But shoot, what was I gonna say? So in Spider-Man 2, when Doc Ock is transported to the hospital and they're trying to take off, and like when they the tentacles attack his the staff, it is horrifying. That's like, oh gee, oh Jesus, that's scary.
yeah, that's a straight up horror scene in a superhero movie. That part with the girl getting dragged away, trying to hold on the floor, and getting dragged out in the darkness, and yeah, some of the imagery and the kind of silhouette shots and stuff. And in that first Spider-Man movie, when he has the nightmare, when he's becoming, when after the night that the spider bites him, when he goes to his bed and he wakes up and he's all buff and stuff, that dream sequence is also very Sam Raimi nightmare skull imagery and sort of dark things. But I think just picking up on what Jessica said about the imagery in Doctor Strange, I would actually argue that it's got some really disturbing imagery in it. We'll get to it in spoilers, but I was quite surprised at how far they went for a 12A MCU movie. I found it quite. I think for teenagers this would be okay, but I wouldn't take a Wayne under 10. I wouldn't take a kid under 10 to see this. I think it'd be a bit, I don't know, a bit nightmare fuel for them, to be honest.
I mean, for me, I want to take my younger nephews and nieces. I want to scare them. Like you said, Jessica,
I
like
think it
it's
depends on the like the mentality of the kid, Like if they're used to watching like I don't know, like gruesome cartoons or whatever, I don't think it would really. But if I took my niece to go see it, yeah, I could see her going, no, not for me. If you took like a young kid who's into the MCU, I don't think it would be too bad. But again, it's just I think discretion on the kid and the parents,
Yeah,
and yeah,
the parents should know best, but I mean, I guess when I think about it, I watched Evil Dead before I was 10, and I watched things darker
yeah.
than this before Kill Bill when it came out, and these sort of way more violent movies than this. So people know their children, I guess. It's up to each to their own, I guess. But yeah.
yeah, and I feel like I don't want to say the only scary thing, but I feel like definitely like the most disturbing thing that Raimi's done was the first Evil Dead with the tree. I won't
Mhm.
go into it, but if you know, you know.
Yeah, and also, Dan, actually, you make a good point. There's just something that happens to a certain character in this. I won't spoil it. I'd say if a kid was a fan of that character or that character doing something or something happening to a character, I think that could disturb them. Like, you build up a character in your head, they're like a hero to you, and you see them get hurt or you see them hurting someone. Like, I feel like that's more disturbing than some of the like just speaking about the imagery in it. I hadn't actually thought about that until now, but I could see that.
And it's not this movie's of course not super bloody. Like it's definitely a lot more bloody compared to any of the MCU movies. And there's a lot more scarier PG-13, and I don't know the ratings in your neck of the woods, Jessica,
Yeah,
but
12A.
whatever that, yeah, like that is like there's a lot more scarier like PG-13 movies. And when it's like we talk about this as a horror movie, it's not like scary, like yeah, jump scares. Nothing really got me, but it's like that can't be fun horror. I compare this to like
Yeah.
this movie, like the story, like immediately starts. You're on the ride. It's not a lot of buildup. It's a little too simple, but you know what? It's like a roller coaster, but it's not like instead of like whoa, like we're going up the hill and then woo. It's like imagine it's like boom, 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 boom. But you're not
Yeah.
sick. You're actually like so much fun.
Yeah, it's like that horror you get like in a ghost train or something in an amusement park. You're right. I think speaking about it, I think the story was actually really weak. Like I think it was the weakest part of the entire thing. I don't think this is a good movie if you do not have that fun Raimi direction, that incredible acting, and the horror tinged elements. Like I wouldn't be a fan of it, but they are so good that I think it holds this. Like I don't think this is a very good, I guess, MCU movie in the way that it ties in a bunch of other MC movies in the way that it is its own unique thing that you can go back to and watch on its own. There's very few ones that I would go back to and watch on their own. Like I'd watch Thor Ragnarok on its own. I like the first Captain America a lot. I'd watch it on its own. I think the first Avengers holds up well. Like even if you haven't seen all that stuff, there's certain like I love Infinity War and Endgame, but you're not just gonna stop at Infinity War. You're gonna watch Endgame. You're not gonna start at Endgame. You're gonna go to the Infinity War. This is an incredible MC movie, and you can just go in, have a awesome time. Like you want a horror tinged MCU? Cool. This is it. And I don't think a lot of them do it. So I kind of see the criticism that way, but also don't you want more unique stuff in this behemoth of a franchise?
Exactly. And I actually I lost my train of thought. Dan, what do you want to add?
Just picking up on that. I can't really go into it in the spoiler-free section. We'll go into it more in spoilers, but I think Sam Raimi did a really good job of taking things that were already established within this universe and using them to create some unique situations. I'll elaborate on what I mean when we get to spoilers because it's quite an important scene that I would say the major example happens. But there's a few times that it's like, oh, this is really creative and something so creative that something you've been probably seen in an indie movie rather than an MCU blockbuster. A couple of scenes like that stood out, and a couple of shots and things like that were really kind of prevalent in this movie, more so than I thought they would be.
That's actually what I forgot about was I do agree, Jessica, not to like its hindrance. I think it's actually to its benefit. Like the story is so simple, but I feel like that allowed Raimi to just like really get into it. Like if it was a lot more, I wouldn't even say complicated, but a lot more like minutia, like tying to the big, like if it was a setup movie for the MCU, I feel like you'll still get that Raimi style, but not as much. While this one is like it's a very not like a beat by beat, like where you think it's gonna go, but it's more of like, oh, they immediately started out. There's not a lot of time. You just get straight into it. But that allowed for a lot more Sam Raimi atmosphere. But I do
Exactly.
think the
Mhm.
weakest part, and actually, this is not a spoiler. Of course, you should watch Doctor Strange beforehand. Um, if you haven't watched WandaVision, you need to do it. A, it's an amazing show or miniseries, I guess. And B, if I don't know how you can't watch WandaVision without going into this movie and getting lost. That's all I'm gonna say before
Yeah,
spoilers.
if you left Scarlet Witch at where she was in the movies, you'd be like, "What the hell?" for what is happening in this. So I feel like yes, it doesn't connect to the MCU that way, but yeah, you're right. Really recommend watching WandaVision.
Yeah. Because at the end of Endgame, you just see her almost kill Thanos. And I believe she's talking to Clint at the end.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's like, and then it's like, oh, this. But I kind of am happy about that. I'm like, okay, you're really gonna tie Disney Plus shows in? Awesome. I think the weakest part of the movie was Christine. This is not the actress's fault. I think she's amazing. I almost said Rachel McFarlane by any chance. God,
McAdams.
yeah,
Yeah.
Rachel McAdams. It's the mix. It's the Seth MacFarlane, McAdams. I'm Irish, so I get it. But maybe it was the high expectations I had. Doctor Strange should very underutilized, which sucks because I love Rachel McAdams. I was said McFarlane again, unironically. But it's also have you guys seen Doctor Strange episode of What If?
hmm
Dan
I've not.
hasn't. So in that, the whole what if, instead of losing the ability to use his hands, he loses his heart. Metaphorically, that means Christine is dead. And I felt they really did a great job establishing the relationship. I'm like, oh wow, their love story is actually great. So I'm expecting that kind of energy. And it's like they keep ref and harping on it, like, oh man, you and Christine. And I'm like, Steven, buddy, you really? Really? This Christine, really?
Yeah, that one
Really this
episode
guy?
did a lot better with their relationship than either of the two movies. Yeah.
100%. And unfortunately, that is such a big part. And while I'm happy Rachel McAdams had a lot more to do with the stories, and like, it's hard to say without like talking about story beats of like her character was more involved with the plot and like helping out than she was in the first one. I think it was just more of like that the Astro fight, what she was doing, and then that was it. But oh well. Anything else about Doctor Strange Stan that you liked or didn't like?
My main negative, my one kind of negative overall, would just be the pace. I felt like there were certain scenes that could have done with a bit more breathing room. I felt like certain parts of it felt a bit condensed, a bit too dense, and could have done with a bit more. It was good in the sense it was fast paced, so it wasn't, even though it was a 2 hour movie, it didn't feel its length. It was constant. It was constantly moving on to the next scene, and the next universe, and the next set piece and whatever. But I think there was just certain scenes where you weren't really able to take in what had happened before something else crazy was happening. And yeah, okay, I guess that's where the Multiverse of Madness title comes from, but I just thought it was a bit overwhelming and a bit. Apparently, I've heard there's apparently a director's cut, which is 2 hours and 40 minutes. This current cut, I think, is 2 hours and 6 minutes. So I would be interested to see that longer cut and see if certain scenes will just get a bit more room to breathe. Particularly, I think somebody picked up on the opening of the film, Defender Strange. That whole sequence, that's a very, very short sequence. And there's several sequences like that just feel like they've been chopped down. They feel like they've been really cut down. I don't know what the decision was for that. I don't know if it was a Marvel decision or if it was Sam Raimi's decision or why that's the length of the theatrical cut. But I felt like you really felt the editing in certain scenes, and it felt super. It felt, exciting and constant action wise, but it just felt a bit, in terms of taking in the story and the consequences of what just happened. We could have done with a bit more time to dwell on that, I think, before it moved on to the next thing. That's my one negative.
Right on. And one thing I forgot to mention, well, not forgot, with Sam Raimi, and I felt maybe I'm just talking about the Spider-Man movies, not so much like the Evil Dead movies, but Danny Elfman, his score was phenomenal. And it just, the one thing that is a negative about that, but I'd really fault anyone, is the Michael Giacchino's theme for Doctor Strange, that little harp that is like a recurring motif during his appearances. You don't hear it. However, the whole score was amazing, and just like it just paired so well with the craziness of Raimi style.
Yeah.
And the craziness of Elfman style. And of course, like during the quieter scenes, like that beautifully matches up. But like when it gets crazy, it's like that. I use the analogy a lot in my review and talking right now of the crazy roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, imagine if that crazy roller coaster had kick-ass music.
Yeah, honestly, I think this might be the most unique implementation of the soundtrack that a Marvel film has done. There has been some incredible scores, but I feel like coming out of this and you're going, yeah, the music really made a couple of scenes, particularly one. I'll get into the spoilers. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. So good. It's just like when you're sitting there watching, you're going, God, I love this film. You know, it's one of those types of ones. Without his incredible work on that score, I don't think it works. And then all the other sort of small little character motifs you have going on throughout it. When they were in, it was like, oh God, yes, this is so good.
Although Michael Giacchino's score wasn't as prevalent in this movie, I do think they did include it at some point. I can't quite pinpoint it at the minute, but it definitely was in the credits. I remember watching the credits, and in the list of songs, Doctor Strange's theme from that first movie by Michael Giacchino was there. So it must have been in the movie at some point, although I can't quite recall it. But yeah, that marriage of Raimi and Elfman, obviously the Spider-Man films, etc. We said how it's a good time to be a Sam Raimi fan. It's also a good time to be a Danny Elfman fan. His Coachella performance was incredible, and then you've got this incredible score that he's delivered, and yeah, it was such a good marriage. I feel like Danny Elfman, he gets shit on a wee bit because I think he kind of blew up, when he blew up 20 years ago after Tim Burton movies and Jack Skellington and stuff, and he was getting hired for a lot of big blockbusters that I don't personally feel like he suited, but I feel like because he's got a very particular way of scoring music. I think that style worked in this movie perfectly. I think that slightly quirky, strange, ethereal sound, almost a wee bit of cheese, just like Sam Raimi, a wee bit of cheese. It's such a good marriage, and it complemented the movie so well. So I think it was a solid choice.
Exactly. And I feel like, I don't want to say redemption. I feel like with comic book fans, some of them. So he scored Justice League, the Joss Whedon version. And I don't blame that score on him because keep in mind, he was brought in like a couple months before the movie. He only had footage that Snyder shot and storyboards. It's like, how the hell do you score that? So fans blamed him. So, and I feel like there hasn't been a great Danny Elfman score in kind of a long time, which I know it's a little harsh to say, but it's like nothing like maybe because it's like the highs of like he did Batman, he did Spider-Man. I mean, oh God, Nightmare Before Christmas, the Simpsons theme. Like all of them are like, that's so great. And then everything else is like, it sounds a little standard. But I'm like, okay, this is like going back to like old school Elfman. So talked about the music, and I can't believe, and we talked about like Christine for us, but instead of being a little negative, what did you guys think of the characters? I mean, we got classics like Juan. This is the Juan Phase 4 era. I'm living for it. Hashtag Juan forever. And we also have newcomer American Chavez. So, Jessica, what do you think? Who stood out for you?
I mean, Benedict Wong always kills it. I just love his like one-liners. He really sells being the Sorcerer Supreme, you know?
He does.
I love his relationship with Doctor Strange. It wouldn't be something I would have picked out in the first Doctor Strange, but with Spider-Man and this, I'm like, yeah, this is great. Please have them in movies all the time together. I did like the America Chavez character, but I'm not personally familiar with her in the comics, so I have no idea if she's like at all comics accurate. The effect of her powers, I've seen it in comics before with the star. It was really cool. I love the effect with that. It might seem a little bit too like teen TV, maybe. Like you could totally see a CW show using that like power effect, but in the big screen. It was really cool. And I won't go into spoilers. Again, they didn't do what I thought they were going to do with Wanda, but I absolutely loved every scene she was in. Without her, I really don't think it would be without Elizabeth Olsen as well. Like, oh God, she's just such an incredible actress to just be in MCU movies. Like, I'm so glad she's decided to stick around. Like, I'm sure the paycheck helps. But yeah, I feel like she's a big reason why so many people like Scarlet Witch and Wanda. She was definitely the standout. Elizabeth Olsen and Sam Raimi totally made this for me. Like I said, I did like America Chavez. I think it was a good introduction for her in the MCU at large. She has a cool power, but I don't know how comic books accurate she is. I feel like you're right about Christine. Like I feel like they could have just cut her and it would have been fine. Like honestly, I don't think she would have been missed all that much. There was a scene at the end that was pretty good. but you honestly, you could have cut it, and I really wouldn't have minded. Yeah, they're my favorites. Love Wong, love him.
Of one. Definitely that. America Chavez is sort of a new character in
Is
terms
she
of
called
comics. I mean,
Miss America in the comics? Is that her name? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
but not so much of like all this legacy. I mean, maybe compared to like Miss Marvel that's coming out next month.
Mhm.
Like maybe because I'm a lot more invested in her and I really wanted to see her story. And of course, we played her game. That'll be a different situation. But I'm like, from what I read from the comics, and of course, the actress who I will totally butcher her name, and we tried, uh, Suji Gomez. Gomas. Very sorry about butchering your pronunciation. And make it up. You were phenomenal in this movie. Congrats. And with this is hard without spoiling it. So, a character from the first Strange, I thought was going to play a bigger part, but it was more of like, wait, you're explaining what happened in between movies, but we never explore that, but we do. But it's like you talk and show. So that was I know it's confusing without spoilers, but it's like when we talk about the spoilers, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. But other than that, love Juan. I love and him and Shang-Chi, amazing.
Yes. Mhm.
And I'm now remembering the when he was sitting in Hotel California.
Yeah, that might be the best thing. That was the end credit scene, wasn't it?
That was
That might
the I think that was the okay, that was I was like yeah, and Shang-Chi, that was like they're talking the holograms, it's Juan and then Captain Marvel
Mhm.
and Mark Ruffalo. And I'm like, was the karaoke like the last one? I'm like, okay, no, that was setting up the inevitable like 10 Rings Disney Plus show,
Yeah.
is what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
But again, we'll talk about the end and post-credit scenes because that was the funniest.
I think it's my number 2. I think that's my number 1 you were just talking about. But yeah, it was good. It was
It
good.
was. All right. Daniel, what about you? What character stood out to you?
Again, I'm just going to champion Wong. I feel like we're just standing Wong on this podcast, but
Yeah.
it was phenomenal. I really like how the characters evolved from just being kind of Doctor Strange's sidekick into being his own solid, fully fledged supporting character in Avengers movies and then kind of across the MCU. And yeah, I think he makes a great Sorcerer Supreme, and I love their banter. Their chemistry is phenomenal between the two Benedicts. They're great on screen together. The other one, again, for reasons that we'll get into in a second, was definitely Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda. She really, I feel like, carried this movie. And as Jessica was saying, she was a pure staple in the movie. I feel like without her, it wouldn't be the film it was. So she was definitely a highlight, and I think she definitely deserves a lot of praise for that. The lady that plays America Chavez, the girl that plays America, she, I was seeing some stuff online before, just in various forums, chatter saying that she was actually a bit wooden and a bit poor. I don't know where that came from because I really, really enjoyed her in this movie.
See?
I don't know
Yeah.
if that was some sort of pre-bias or
Mhm.
whatever, but when I went into the film, the only part that I thought was a little bit ropey was the scene. Well, I can't really actually say without spoiling, but there's a certain scene where the character passes out. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler. And it was just the way she passed out was a wee bit pantomime. That was the only part that somewhat took me out of her performance. Other than that, I thought she was solid. She did a great job, especially for being the age she is. I thought she done a really good job as a solid supporting character and a good introduction to that character in the MCU.
Yeah, totally. So before we head into spoilers, not is so much like a final score. I want to do it like at the end of this podcast. But Jessica, do you recommend people see this movie?
Oh yeah, I do. If you're like a stan of MCU tie-in stuff, I could see you not liking it. It's very much a standalone film, but it does have significant stuff in it, so I feel like you kind of have to see it. Like you're not going to not see it. I actually would recommend it, this one, even if you haven't seen WandaVision, even if you don't know what the hell's going on. If you are a Sam Raimi fan, you're going to like this film. Yeah, Elizabeth Olsen's great. Sam Raimi's great. I do highly recommend it, and I won't spoil my score, but it is pretty high.
Yeah. Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, again, as Jessica said, I think there's a solid Venn diagram here. Like, even if it might not be the movie you thought it was going to be going in. I think if you're a WandaVision fan and you want to see a kind of sequel to that story, this is it. If you're a fan of the first Doctor Strange movie, it's also a sequel to that, and really the Avengers movies that character appeared in. And it's also a solid sequel to just Sam Raimi-ish. He's back to his classic horror roots, and as we're saying, he's not made a really solid horror movie in a long, long time. Because obviously Great and Powerful obviously wasn't a horror film, and although Drag Me to Hell was decent, I feel like Doctor Strange is in my Sam Raimi ranking is above that. So I'm very glad that he's back to it's kind of a return to form in some ways. So yeah, it was solid. I loved it, and yes, definitely recommend it.
All right. So that was our no spoilers part of the podcast. Please just pause it. And guess what? Go see this amazing movie. You're going to have a good time. And guess what? You'll have a better time listening to our spoilers. So give a little countdown. 5, 4, 1, boom. You enter the spoiler zone. John Krasinski is Fantastic Four. Mr. Fantastic. Oh my God, it's Black Bolt. What? You showed up and Samantha? Oh my God, I knew about Professor X, but the old school chair. Oh my gosh, Wanda, you're bad from the beginning. Jessica.
With John Krasinski, that is like I told you, like over here, like with you, Dan, like UK audiences don't go generally like ham in movies and stuff. Like No Way Home, they kind of did for like some of like Tobey Maguire and stuff. Not really and stuff like this. When John Krasinski was revealed as Fantastic Four, people were like, yeah, like give it a little clap. And that was a cool moment to be in the cinema. And I feel like it was really clever of them to kind of like trial him as Mr. Fantastic. Like you're like, okay, here's all his traditional powers. Here's what he traditionally looks like. Here's John Krasinski. Do you like it? So like, should we cast him? I don't know.
Like how they do like backdoor pilots. Like, hey, do you like that episode?
Yeah.
The whole show. It's like, oh, come on. Like, well, to explain why it's so significant, not just because we are seeing Mr. Fantastic. I feel like since the Disney merger with 20th Century Fox, probably one of the most significant like fan casts that just keeps popping up is John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. And now I'm saying it out loud. So WandaVision, oh my God, do you guys remember when everyone's like,
yes,
he's going to be in it? I'm like, what? No, guys, stop. And guess what? It wasn't in it. And I feel like each time it's like, oh, he's going to be in it. He's going to be in it. And then it's like, guys, he's not going to be in it. And then all of a sudden, like, I was already, so they mentioned the Baxter Foundation. I'm like, whoa. Is that the first ever like mention like Fantastic Four related thing in the MCU? I'm freaking out about that. And then we go to the Illuminati scene. And it's like, I knew about Captain Marvel. I saw the trailer. It wasn't Tom Cruise as Iron Man. I was kind of expecting more of that. And then they're like Black Bolt. And I'm like, comic accurate Black Bolt? Full on suit? And I'm like, I can't even tell, but I'm like, I'm really sure that's the same guy. And so Mungor, go see a Star Trek show on Paramount Plus. I'm trying to do him a favor. I butcher his name. I promote a show. What's the show?
It was the same actor then, yeah, because I didn't watch.
From
was it
Inhumans.
Anson Mount, I think is his name. Yeah,
yeah, I know it's Ansel. I watched that show, so you guys didn't have to. And then all of a sudden, and then they introduced him, and I won't curse. You know what? I'm gonna curse because I'm like already freaking out. And I told you so in the pre-show. I'm telling you guys, I'm like, I carried that audience for reactions. Besides someone saying like, "Oh, that was cool," with Brad Pitt's bullet train after the trailer. So it was like, phew, and I'm like, oh shit. You crazy Kevin Feige, you did it. You son of a bitch. You did it. Then they killed him off.
Yeah. Interested to hear your thoughts on this, Dan, but also I want to say they should not have revealed Professor X in the trailer, and they should not have revealed Peggy Carter as Captain Britain. Like, and Captain Marvel. Like, just keep that out.
Can I reveal why they should have?
Why?
okay, it's kind of like, hey, this is what you're getting. Like, focus on this, but don't focus on that. That's the cameos you're getting. Let the Tom Cruise Iron Man, because I'll go into this why when we talk about Wanda. I watched the trailers, but I wasn't like analyzing it. So I saw Peggy Carter's like Shield. I saw the Captain Marvel. I heard Patrick Stewart, and I'm like, all right, maybe one or two. But for those cameos, I did not expect. So maybe Dan, you have different thoughts, but that's just me. That kind of like
Um,
threw me for a left turn. Dan.
I think I'm very much in the minority. I don't care about spoilers. I've never been sensitive to spoilers. I can still go and enjoy something if I know what's going to happen. I'm not really wanting to avoid spoilers. Like I've never really been that sensitive to it. I appreciate that other people are, which is why I try and dance around it when I'm talking about something. But if somebody tells me something that really doesn't ruin the experience for me, so I didn't mind at all that we knew that Professor X and Peggy Carter were going to be in this. In terms of the John Krasinski reveal, I'm pleased that it's him and he looks great in the suit. He looks solid. He looks just like the Photoshop that was going about beforehand.
It was.
And it was a nice reveal. But I sort of think the Baxter Foundation reference, to me, that was the confirmation. Like, if you follow this stuff like I do and you read all the rumors and all the rest of it, you see these YouTube theory videos and blah blah blah. You've got these things in the back of your mind. Like going into No Way Home, you had in your back of your mind that Toby and Andrew were going to show up. Going into this, you had in the back of your mind that John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic was going to be on that council. And then as soon as Christine Palmer said the words Baxter Foundation, I was like, oh well, he's going to be one of them. So when he was revealed, it wasn't really a shock. It was that was, to me, the shock was the reference to Baxter Foundation. Once they actually showed him, I was like, well, yeah, it would be weird if they didn't show him after mentioning that. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I enjoyed the review. That I mentioned earlier, the pace of the film, the sort of breathing room that these scenes could have used. Some of the complaints I've seen online are that these characters were wasted in some sense. That they were sort of, and I realised they're in a different universe, but even in that universe, they were sort of wasted. I believe if we spent a bit longer within that scene, within that Illuminati base, and Wanda breaking in, and certain scenes in the room with the Council and Doctor Strange, and we developed that a bit more, it would maybe feel like they were wasted less. You know, if they were fleshed out a bit more, I think you could have more of a pass. Whereas it really was kind of like, here's a character, here's her name, this is what they did, this is who they were in the comic, right? Okay, here comes Wanda, and then she kills them off. You know, it was just that, and then that, and that was it. And it did feel a bit dense. I enjoyed. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the deaths. I loved watching Mister Fantastic's head pop, and watching Black Bolt's head cave in, and watching Doctor Wanda snap Professor X's neck. You know, all the deaths reminded me of like something like Invincible, to be honest. But
Yeah,
I
that's a
thought it
good
was
comparison.
I thought it was just really effective though, like one after the other. And something that I've always, again, I wanted to talk about Wanda in the non-spoiler section. Something that I've always enjoyed is just watching a powerful character in their prime just tearing through a room of people, just so superior to everybody else there that it's just like a minor inconvenience. We kind of seen it in like Rogue One with Darth Vader stoking down that corridor and wiping out all the guards. When Wanda walked out of that facility, taking down the Ultron bots, it had the same vibe. And to see that, just that kind of unstoppable force, just nothing's, the determination and the power she's got, nothing's going to stop it. And it was just really cool to see them all try and fail and get killed off. The one, I wouldn't say it's an issue, it's more of a kind of meta issue, it's not an issue with the film. I don't know how I feel about Mr. Fantastic being in the first version that we see in the MCU of Mr. Fantastic as an alternate version. I don't know how I feel about that. Like before we see the 616 main version, we've seen an alternate version who's now dead. I don't know how I feel about that in the kind of scheme of things. Maybe it's just because we're so conditioned to like get an origin movie, get a team up movie, and then if you want to kill the character, you go there. I think to start with the death of an alternate version of the character is just quite an interesting difference. It's maybe just something that I'll need to get used to, I'll need to sit with. As I said, it's not a problem with the movie per se, it's just the way it was introduced. But yeah, I enjoyed that scene, and I certainly enjoyed the deaths. I enjoyed the carnage. That was what I wanted going in. And we kind of spoke before about how adult we think this movie is. really the reason's Wanda. Like the person that sort of causes the most disturbing imagery in this movie is Wanda. There's a certain scene with an actor, Sheila Atom, who was one of the sorcerers, and she's the one that grabs the dark holds when Wong's strung up. She grabs the dark hold and stabs it. See the way she burns alive and turns to ash while there's tears pouring down her face. I found that really distressing to watch. There's that scene. There's obviously the scene Peggy Carter getting pretty much split in half with her own shield. You've got Mr. Fantastic's kind of getting turned into ribbons and then his head pops and then and that scene of Black Bolt's head caving in. It was so visceral and so effective. And I also love the scene with Professor X just on a cinematography level. That white space that they were in with the red mist. That I love just minimalist shots like that where it's just basically two colours on screen. I thought that just looked dynamite on in the cinema. And it was to see that kind of zombified demonic Wanda was really cool. Really enjoyed that.
And you want to talk about Wanda before we talk about Wanda? Just that whole scene, savage. Of how Mr. Fantastic is trying to be reasonable, which I feel like just like in the comics, he doesn't really want to fight. He will try to de-escalate, and he's like, "Hey, I saw paraphrasing like, hey, I got kids," and she's like, "Do they have a mom?" And he's like, "Yes," and it'll be like, "Well, then someone will mourn for you," or something like that. I'm like, "Oh," and they're like, "Hey, well, Wanda, Black Bolt right here can just kill you with his voice." And I know how powerful Black Bolt is. He wasn't as like I feel like when he said like I'm sorry, maybe it's just me in the like reading the comics and all the other material, but when he's like if he just says I'm sorry, he'll basically like destroy a mountain. So maybe that's the same way and maybe it was just graphic. I don't know. But I'm like I know his power level. And then when she says what mouth? And it's just like and he's like, "Mm," and it just like pops and it just caves in. I was like, oh my gosh, that is awesome.
That was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Not to
And
skip ahead the
then,
favorite scenes, but so
oh,
good.
and then just like unraveling him, like, and I love how like Captain Carter and Captain Marvel's like, all right, we're gonna defeat you. It's like your two most powerful. Okay, maybe Captain Marvel definitely had a chance. Captain Carter, you can't do this all day. You get your jetpack and you got to get out. Oh, by the way, was that a Rocketeer reference? Now I'm just thinking about it. Oh, that's cool. The '90s Disney movie, The Rocketeer, who the director also did the first Avenger. Fun fact. Anyway, that's just so much good, and I feel like it is interesting, Dan, you brought up of how like you introduce this character who's going to be a big part going forward. And just like, well, definitely the Fantastic Four is going to be a big part. And Reed Richards in the comics is so important to Spider-Man, to lots of different things. His first appearance, dead. And of course, 616, Reed Richards, will probably be a lot more alive, but it's like, hey, you showed us, you gave us the appetizer. We want that as the meal. So we can talk all day about the Illuminati stuff, but I want to talk about Wanda because going into this movie, I talked about not really looking at the trailers and all that, and I figured out why. I was focused on the Batman. I honestly was. I was like,
Makes
I'm
sense.
I'm focused. I'm watching everything. I'm looking. I'm listening to the music again. Doctor Strange looks great, but I'm like, I'm the distracted boyfriend. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be. Oh, actually, it was a good reason to be distracted. Anyway, word stuff. I did not realize Wanda would be the villain from the get go. I thought like a third act twist or she was like it halfway through, but once she's through the orchard and she says, American Chavez, it's like, oh, and then it's like the illusion goes away. And I know like I've seen that trailer. They get really focus like when you do something, you're the hero, but when I do, and that's a villain. That's not really fair. And I thought like I'm like, oh wow, we're getting a Scarlet Witch main villain, and Elizabeth Olsen killed it. I always felt like she was great from Age of Ultron, but like each appearance she has, she just gets better and better
Hmm.
and better. And yeah, maybe WandaVision is like at the height of that, but like she was fierce. Jessica, I'm about to explode my vocal cords a la Mr. Fantastic. Talk to me. Maybe I should. Maybe you guys wish I'm Black Bolt and I just like shut up.
No.
I just sign
What
language
mouth,
like
Mark?
I'm like just my sign language. I'm like "Rah."
Yeah.
Jessica. What did you think of Wanda? Full spoilers.
So it's like she was absolutely the best part of the film for me. She is 100% the main villain. Like she's kind of like a horror monster in this. Like the way she moved in certain scenes, all of her actions. My God, did she kill a lot of people? It's kind of like you're making her so unredeemable, like traditionally hero wise, but this is incredible. That's the bit I thought was might have been a bit disturbing for kids. Like if you're like, oh, I love Wanda, she's so cool, and you see her go full villain, like, it's not controlling a town in WandaVision, which is not great, not awesome. They explored that well in the show. I think you're right. That was Elizabeth Olsen's best performance. Like, that was so good as Wanda as a character. This is a movie so good as the Scarlet Witch as a villain. Like, I feel like they're totally different, and I love both for totally different reasons. I think if you're expecting stuff from WandaVision into this, you might be a little bit disappointed because the character development is she wants her kids back, but she is like, yes, you could say the Darkhold has corrupted her, and that's why she's went on such a killing spree, like a mass murder spree. But it is, I mean, she's supposed to be the hero, you know? WandaVision was kind of like, this is no, she's a murderer, she's a mass murderer, and it was incredible. And I never thought I'd say those words. And well, my best friend, like her biggest fear going into this was that Wanda would be the villain. Like she just wanted like a happy ending for Wanda. You know, she's been through a lot, and now she's turned into a monster, basically. Like that cool effect she had on her fingers that Agatha had. Um, that was cool. I feel like that showed like it was corrupting her. I don't think they did. I feel like they had an out with this multiverse story. I've heard this said before, and I agree. Like you could have made it a multiverse version of Wanda doing this. Like she could have had the exact same story, but she's a multiverse. Then you're like, oh, but our Wanda is okay. She'll come in and save the day. Not that alternate Wanda. I hope she comes back. Actually, that would be interesting to continue that multiverse story in that universe about the ramifications of all those people dying. Um, so I'm a bit like up in the. I don't think it was a very good story for Wanda or character development, but yet it was so cool. And Elizabeth Olsen was incredible, and she's shown that she can do emotional stuff in this film, but mostly in WandaVision. And just like she's an incredible horror actress, like so good, so creepy. Or I kind of do think that would creep out kids if they saw Wanda like that, and then as this villain. Yeah, so cool. Responsible for almost every kill scene in the movie. Um, it's basically Wanda's Wanda in the multiverse of madness for me.
Yeah, Dan.
There were two scenes in particular where I thought she was just electrifying. The scene where she's chasing them down the tunnels, like the sewers, before they find that sort of secret room where Doctor Strange puts his watch in to open the door. That sequence where she's chasing them down, she's just ripped through the Illuminati. She's just ripped through the council members, and she's covered in Ultron oil, and she's got these red glowing eyes, and she was just like an unstoppable, limping, powerful, insane, irredeemable force. It was like the Terminator. I was like watching the Terminator coming after the Connors, or like a horror movie like Freddy Krueger, or like a slasher movie. It was. Yeah, it was just seeing this kind of like desperate husk of a person who's just got no humanity left. I thought that was fascinating, that scene, and that was straight out of a horror film. That sequence, and the first sequence where she dreamwalks and she possesses the other Wanda in the kitchen. I thought that was a really effective scene. The way that they sort of used some slightly trippy horror imagery, like when she first, good innocent Wanda can feel that something's wrong, and she's walking through the house and she's telling the boys to stay where they are, and and then the picture as she passes it stares at her, looks at her as she passes, and then she looks down at this teacup, and you can see the waves, this literal storm in the teacup, happening, and then she looks in the window, and then that's when other Wanda's there, and she grabs her through the window in a kind of jump scare moment. And yeah, I thought that scene was so effective, and again showcased Elizabeth Olsen's talents. But yeah, those two moments were my two favourite Wanda moments in the whole movie. But she was phenomenal through the whole thing, and as we're saying, she's a catalyst for the whole thing. And yeah, I would say she pretty much carries, even though it's a Doctor Strange movie, and Benedict Cumberbatch is great in his role. I feel like Elizabeth Olsen really carries this film on her shoulders, in my opinion.
Exactly. I feel like it is an interesting. I feel like that's a little bit of a cop out with Jessica. Like, oh, that's an alternative version. Like, I like the tragic. Bring on the sadness. Ooh,
Yeah, but you know either A, she's not dead, or B, they're just going to bring in a multiverse version anyway. And at least you could have the satisfaction of going, oh, our Wanda isn't a horrific murder machine, you know?
I believe that Elizabeth Olsen's just signed a 7-year contract with Marvel, so she's not dead. Spoilers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just like, oh no, Kingpin's dead. He's never coming back. Like, yeah, sure.
Wink. It's the Agatha wink.
Yeah.
But also, Elizabeth Olsen and I want like one thing. Her whispering, no more mutants. If you know,
Well,
you know.
I reckoned that this movie was actually going to close the multiverse. My original theory was that the film was going to end with Wanda saying no more multiverse, and a reference to House of M, and also closing out the multiverse trilogy of Loki, No Way Home, and this. I thought that was my prediction for how the film would end. It didn't end that way, but yeah, I would like to see, because traditionally Wanda and Pietro are mutants in the comics, so I think when they do introduce the X-Men and the mutants, it'll be interesting to see that parallel, to see if they do address that or not, because she is kind of tangentially tied to the X-Men.
Exactly. So let's go into just general moments. Can be favorite, least, and you brought up Jessica. I feel like before we got into spoilers, and I'm assuming you were talking about the music battle.
Oh, yeah.
So people at my work are like, that was the stupidest part of the movie. And I was like, how dare you? And I don't know about you guys, it had big Sorcerer's Apprentice vibes. I don't know why. It just brought me back to like old school, like Disney, just playing with that. Maybe that's why I liked it. And it was just like, I was like, listen, guys, do you want like magic orbs and all that? And like, pew, 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 pew. It's like, that's just, you might think it's hokey and cheesy, but it was creative and I'll take it.
Exactly. That's why, like I'm like, yeah, this is like, oh, like, yeah, Sam Raimi came up with that idea. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, he
Exactly.
directed the shit out of that. Like, it was kind of like as it was happening, you're like, are they doing this? Like, he's noticed the note, and then they're throwing the notes, and it's like the battle with the music, and then that like guitar riff whenever the third eye comes in.
Yeah.
It's so good the way they implemented the music, and that is one of the best scenes I've seen in the MCU. Like, you could just uh, go to that, fast forward to that scene and play, and you'd have an awesome time. No context to any of the film. I don't need like yeah, there's incredible action in the MCU. You don't need like gritty, hardcore action all the time. That's ridiculous, borderline cheesy, and incredible. Like you're like, oh, this makes no sense. And I was like, have you seen the rest of the film? It's a superhero film. Like, come on, go with it. One of my favorite scenes. I won't hog it all. I'll just say a couple. But that Black Bolt's head exploding, that's when you're like, oh shit, she means business. Like, yes, she has killed some people at the temple, but it didn't feel like visceral enough. Like, it's just like whispering in their ear and shooting a few bolts. That is like his head just went pop. All of those deaths were incredible. I thought the Peggy Carter death, like, this is just me as a horror fan, was like cut a little bit too much, but obviously this is a PG-13 movie. Like, I feel like,
Exactly.
yeah, they went harder in with John, what was his name in Falcon and the Winter Soldier? I can't remember why. I can't remember his name.
Oh, John Walker.
Yes, John Walker. Like, I feel like they went harder with his kill with the shield, but because it took me a minute, like, oh no, wait, is she cut in half? I'm like, oh yeah, she is. And then I thought, well, it's a PG-13 12A movie. They're not going to show Peggy Carter getting, sawed off.
And the thing with like the John Walker, of course, like just like him just like doing that like multiple times, that's already horrific. But the final shot of like him standing with the Captain American shield that we all hold so fondly bloodied,
Mhm.
that just leaves like a bigger impact. And like how you mentioned with like the other sorcerers, like we don't know them, but it was like, oh damn, she means business. Black Bolt, knowing him,
Mhm.
oh wow, you just killed him like that. Damn.
Yeah, introducing Mr. Fantastic and then immediately killing him, like, that was Dan, I agree, that was one of the best scenes in the film, just that pure Wanda killing machine moment. Another one I wanted to shout out just for now is when Doctor Strange, like, you've seen it a little bit in the trailers, Doctor Strange and, America Chavez going through all the multiverses, and you get to see all the different changes and effects, and I'm sure there's, like, cameos and stuff there that I didn't pick up on and you're not gonna pick up on through a first watch. I'm so interested to see what people who are super fans will get from it, but even just watching it, it was visually awesome with the paint universe. There was like the old timey one, black and white. There's so many I can't even remember off the top of my head. It
Animation
was
one.
Yeah, it was so cool, like going through them all at once. One of the best scenes. I actually forgot about the scene Dan brought up about like the storm in the teacup. That was visually probably one of the best moments in it. But yeah, there's just a couple of my favorite moments.
Dan, what about you?
So yeah, 100% that music scene. I loved that scene because as it was happening, you could almost picture Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman coming up with that together, and pitching it to Cumberbatch and Disney, and being like, "Oh, it's an exciting
Yeah.
scene," and it was so well done. Just the implementation of it, the use of the Beethoven classical score with the different kind of some of the notes were distorted, and just the visuals of it, and it works so well. But there were several scenes throughout the film. I love that, as Jessica said, that Black Bolt scene. That was the click from like, oh, shit's getting real. Do you know what I mean? That was the moment that it was like, oh, we're turning things up a notch here. So I love that too. But I really liked the scene I really enjoyed the montage where alternate version Baron Mordo was describing dreamwalking, and it was a kind of montage, and some of the transitions were really interesting and again really different. They felt like something for an indie movie. They didn't feel like something within the MCU, which I really enjoyed. And then that also leads on to the council scene. While Wanda's having her carnage outside and wiping through the Illuminati, Strange is in the courtroom and Mordo's kind of supervising him, and he starts to goad him into a fight. He starts to say things like he's got these anti-magic handcuffs on that he can't do any spells, and he's saying things like, "I bet you're glad that I died in this universe. You always wanted my job. You always wished you were me." Blah blah blah, and that pisses him off enough that he comes down with a magic sword and starts swinging at him. And then, of course, Strange manages to get one of the cuffs off and put it on Mordo, and then the two of them fall down into this like pit below the council, and this is what I referenced earlier in the non-spoiler section, how Raimi was able to take elements that have already been established within this universe and use them in a creative way to do something new. Like, in what other context could you have Doctor Strange and Baron Mordo having a hand-to-hand fist fight? Like, to come up with the circumstances for that, because he manages to put the other cuff on Mordo when they fall down, so neither of them, they're trying to use spells and they can't do anything. So it's like, well, what else do? You just start swinging at the guy. And it's also a really well choreographed fight. And yeah, I just thought it was such a creative kind of interlude to like all the CGI fest that the movie was, just to have a nice bit of solid choreography, and you could tell that it was also Chiwetel Ejiofor and Benedict Cumberbatch doing the choreography, which always helps when it's actors themselves. And yeah, it was just a solid wee kind of interlude moment away from all the CGI kind of madness that was happening outside that I thought was really effective. So that scene was definitely a standout, but there was every scene was phenomenal. I don't think there was a scene I disliked. I love Zombie Strange at the end. The scene of Zombie Strange resurrecting from the place he was buried was straight out of a classic, like 70s horror zombie movie with the hand coming out the grave. And then the scene with the spirits coming out of him when Christine Palmer tells him to use the spirits, they were just like the Deadites, the Evil Dead, for Army of Darkness. It was just like the Deadites, and then they've kind of formed these wings, a sort of cape for him, and all of that. I loved all of that imagery. It was so Sam Raimi. It was so 100% horror, and it was great. Loved it.
Doctor Strange talking to America Chavez with his it's like that scene in Resident Evil where the jaw goes down like that, and he's trying to give like a heartfelt pep talk, like, you had it in you all along, kid, but like his face is hanging off. Oh my god, that was so good, so
The
good.
thing is, like, I wanted it more like hanging off, but I know like this, he's like, no. But Raimi, we let you do too much.
Yeah.
Be like, it had going on.
Yeah, like
It's
blood
funny, like really
gushing
like
from it.
decrepit, and that's why I forgot. Like, I really thought evil Doctor Strange was gonna be like the main villain because
Mhm.
I felt like just watching trailers like just a couple of times, like, oh, that's what they're doing. Cool, cool. I'm in.
I'm glad they
Um,
gave him this direction though. Yeah.
yeah, I felt like a lot of the marketing for me just being like casual compared to like other times. I'm like, oh, I love the misdirection. And oh shoot, what's another good one? Oh, I already mentioned it. Bruce Campbell's post credit scene.
Yeah, that was
So
good.
when they his appearance, they're like, "Oh, we're off in like 3 weeks." I'm like, "Okay, that's the post credits." And I was thinking, I'm like, "Okay, I know what's gonna come. Like, it's gonna be like, it's gonna stop and be like, whew, and like stopping." I'm like, "But you know what? I'll stay." And it's like, who? And then he's like, "It's over." I was dying. I'm like, oh my god. And everyone's
Yeah.
just like, okay.
Yeah, that's what we stayed for. Yeah.
That's what I
I
was hoping for.
yeah, I was happy I stayed for it, yeah. It kinda reminded me of I think it was a Spider-Man one where, Captain America sits down and he's talking about waiting, about patience.
And being
Uh,
disappointed.
I remember people getting
Expecting something
so
big.
angry at that, and, like, they've just done it again, but it was Bruce Campbell, so totally
Yeah,
fine.
and just being just being like, "It's over!"
I did originally think that Bruce Campbell was going to have a bigger cameo. I thought he was maybe going to be an alternate version of Doctor Strange at one point.
Oh.
But I enjoyed that cameo because it was obviously a reference. Oh, there's my camera again. It was obviously a reference to Evil Dead, with the whole, the hand attacking him and stuff, as a classic kind of sequence for the Evil Dead before he cuts his hand off and sticks the chainsaw in. So yeah, it was just nice to see that.
Yeah, totally. And also with, like, Dead Strange, Undead Strange, I'm like, Dead Strange? That doesn't feel right. But, like, when Christine's like, "Wait," and she's explaining, like, the plot point of, like, "But it has to be within your universe," and he's like, "Who said about anything, like, living?" Basically like that, and then it cuts to, like, the George Romero Evil Dead, like, "Ah!" And I was like, again, I carried that audience on my back. I really did
It
for
was
you
good.
guys.
It was all, like, set up, like, just on the borderline, like, it's fun horror stuff, like, if you've watched that type of horror, like, you know what you're getting in for, and
Mhm.
then, like, the hand, it was just all I feel like that was paced really well, you know, the cutting directing skills of the cutting, yeah, really great
And
moment.
one of my favorite Doctor Strange moments of like his MCU journey so far, besides seeing the first time he's experienced like all the different planes and he's still tripping out, is when he's fighting with Thanos and all of a sudden he levitates and all the hands appear. And then not only did they did that in this movie, he was all undead zombie hands. I'm like, give me a t-shirt.
Yeah, that was a
Just
cool
gotta
ass
add
scene.
that on the wish list. Steam Deck and that. And Bunger plushie.
Oh, yeah,
I
well
know your dog has one,
no,
but
baby Yoda has one.
yeah, your dog, Yoda.
I also forgot to mention I loved Wong's line whenever he sees Doctor Strange dreamwalking in the zombie. He's just like, I don't want to know. I
Yeah.
don't even want to know. Oh, that got a big laugh from everyone and well deserved.
What about so I mentioned like and we'll definitely go back to favorite moments if you guys want. Any like least favorite moments? And it's not like there is a significant like, ooh, this part. It was just the whole Christine story arc of like, man, you guys you guys didn't make it. And I'm like, no, did you see the first one? They didn't have any chemistry. See what if? I don't get it. But
uh
Christine being like the multiverse, like kind of expert, like scientifically, I'm like, oh, I like that. But I don't know, Jessica, any moments that were just a little meh?
I felt like when Doctor Strange talked to Wanda at the temple, and she was like, right, well, this is on you now. What's gonna happen is on you. I felt like that would have been more appropriate later on when she started killing the alternate versions of like Black Bolt and all, because that fight was a little underwhelming. Like, fine, it was just like, oh, here you go. and then she's kind of like scoping around the place looking for a way to like shooting little like I don't think that was awesome. I still think her flying is really cool. I love
Mhm.
Elizabeth Olsen's like acting when she's doing her powers and her flying. She just sells it completely. But I felt like that was a little underwhelming. Not that there wasn't a lot of action, just the way that it was kind of like structured. Like, well, you're in for this, and then it was I'm just gonna hover around here for a bit and shoot a tiny bit until I can kill these people. Honestly, I think that's the only one where I was a little bit disappointed. Like I said, I thought the story was a bit weak, but in these types of movies, for me, you really don't need to have an incredible story. Um, and yeah, not too many bad moments for me.
Yeah, and also this was kind of definitely alluding to in the non-spoiler because you brought up Dan Mordor, and it's like at the end of Strange, he has his vengeance, no more sorcerers. We haven't seen him till now, and Doctor Strange's like, oh yeah, he's been trying to kill me. I'm like, what? Oh, we're not going to see that. And I thought in the advertising, like, okay, well, this might be we seen this guy in Doctor Strange 1, but it's like we only see an alternate version of him. Like something like Mr. Fantastic and Black Bolt. I'm not saying who cares, but it's like it's not expected when you have a character and his journey into progressing to this villain. And it's like, oh, so we're just being told this? No development on that? We're just like, oh yeah, he's been trying to kill me, yada yada. I'm like, huh, what sucks? That's why I forgot. Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think it was almost as if the MCU somewhat forgot about Mordo in that setup at the end of the first Doctor Strange movie because they kind of jumped so far into the Thanos stuff with Doctor Strange after the first Doctor Strange movie. Mordo kind of get left by the wayside, and now in this movie, I kind of guess from seeing the trailers with the different hairstyle and stuff, I kind of assumed this was going to be an alternate version, but I still figured we would address somewhat more that other version of Mordo. I thought maybe that's how the movie would open, would be a fight between they two, and then that would kind of be put to bed, and then we move on to the multiverse stuff. It feels like there's a Doctor Strange movie 1.5 in between that we've missed, that we've not seen. Maybe they could do a Disney Plus show, like a kind of prequel, or Black Widow was a prequel. They could do something like that, I guess. But yeah, in terms of scenes that I didn't like, the only, as I said, my main issue was the pacing of the movie. I feel like certain scenes could have actually been longer and had more let me breathe. So there wasn't anything that I would take out necessarily, but I would just like to see more of certain scenes that were in there. So that's kind of my main thought on that. But in terms of scenes I really liked, I loved that scene. Just my last one I really liked. I loved that scene at the end of the movie. You were speaking about Rachel McAdams. That scene where she's fighting with when Strange is convulsing on the floor and she opens his eye and one of the deadites, it's not a deadite, but it basically is, flies out and she's fighting with that. And you get that brilliant Sam Raimi shot where she's fighting with the camera. She's looked in the barrel of the lens and she's doing all that. I love that sequence. I thought it was a great sequence. And it was, again, probably the highlight for Rachel McAdams in the movie was that scene. I really enjoyed that.
Totally. So, any other like moments you want to mention? Could be good, could be bad, could be meh, could be sad, could be happy, could be angry.
I did mention the fact that I thought they had that scene at the end where Doctor Strange just goes, "I love you," like he just says it, and then they have that small conversation. I thought that was well done, but that's it. Like I don't think their relationship was really drawn upon very well. Like we mentioned it before. That I think What If did a better job at the whole thing, but it feels weird that that kind of wasn't what this was about. It was more like a Wanda movie than it was Doctor Strange and say Christine movie. Um, but that bit from them there was good at the end. I thought they were both they acted really well in that scene as well. Like they really sold it. Like with worse actors, that would have been real bad. But
Hmm.
it was good. I liked it. And I actually forgot about that moment Dan brought up with Christine fighting the monsters. You're like, yeah, that's totally out of Evil Dead.
I'm trying to think. Actually, we'll talk about the mid-credit scene in a little bit. But Daniel, anything you want to add?
Just speaking to the Christine Palmer thing, I actually think her main function in this movie, in terms of the main Christine Palmer with the wedding scene, etc., that was obviously to set up the idea that this Doctor Strange is different from the rest, because we kind of get into that later on about how the other Doctor Stranges try and just steal America Chavez's power because that's the easiest option, whereas this Doctor Strange goes to extreme lengths to save her. So I think Christine's wedding kind of sets that idea up early on. It also somewhat, I believe, is putting their relationship to bed, so that Mark, you just alluded to the post-credit scene where we see Charlize Theron's character. In the comic, that character and Doctor Strange end up becoming a romantic couple. So I wonder if that's where they're going in the movie, and this was kind of them saying goodbye to Benedict Cumberbatch and Christine Palmer's, relationship, so that they can move on to something new. I feel like it was okay. Maybe it was a wee bit underutilized to some extent, but I feel like that's why it was underutilized. It was because the snap happened. Christine in this universe has moved on. Although I agree that acting in that scene was phenomenal, where he tells her that he loves her in every universe, and you bought it. I feel like that was like, right, okay, that's been this period of his life romantically anyway, and now we're going to move on to something beyond that. I think that's kind of how I had it in my head anyway coming out.
Yeah, and I'd like to actually I think them having like the weak moments of not focusing on that and maybe not focusing on an incredible story, like I think we talked about the story on it, actually helped the movie because then it really let Raimi elevate the Wanda moments, just the whole like campy funness of it, like the horror elements. I don't for me anyway. I don't know about you guys. The story didn't do much for me. It wouldn't be something but I'd definitely go back and watch this film because of it. Sometimes I feel like you need to tone down certain things to amplify other things. So I don't think it would be the same sort of movie if they had focused so much on Christine and Doctor Strange, or even just more on Christine. So yeah.
Exactly. So mid-credit scene of very famous for the MCU. I feel like this one, it definitely just didn't disappoint because again, I carried that audience on my back, and all of a sudden, boom. Well, okay, the ending, when Wanda's like, "You sure you weren't infected?" And Strange is like, "Nah, just gonna go for a walk." Ah, third eye. Oh, I guess he was infected. And then, boom, mid-credit scene. I shouted, "Charlize Theron, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "She clear?" And then in the end credits, I was like, okay, let's go. And actually, that is a brilliant observation. If that is what they're going with, like, hey, as Daniel put out, like, we're just gonna put this Rachel thing to bed, night nurse. Maybe she'll be back. Maybe not as romantic, but like that multiverse aspect from that version. Because I feel like the 616, I think we're moving on from that one. But what Charlize Theron can do, and she opens portal to the dark dimension. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, okay, what's gonna happen next? And if Sam Raimi returns, what he can do with that darkness, whoo. Jessica, what would you like to see for Doctor Strange's future? Not just for like the third one, but just going forward in the MCU.
Well, specifically for the third one, I want Raimi coming back.
Hell yeah. And
Yeah.
bring Elfman back.
Yeah, just so good. It doesn't have to be like a carbon copy of what happened here, but like look what he did with Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2. Yeah, let's forget about Spider-Man 3, but
Well, in fairness, I don't think it was his fault. Sony definitely was like, I'm gonna put these hands in the pot right here.
yeah.
This is how you cook in America. Dum, 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 dum. Right, guys? You don't know.
I don't know. I'll believe you. That's how you cook in America.
Yeah, that's why our food's so famous.
So yeah, I'd love Raimi coming back. I would have really liked to see the movie from it was Robert C. Cargill and what was his name? Derrickson? The director?
Oh,
Scott Derrickson.
Scott Derrickson. Yeah, I really would have loved to have seen what film they were thinking up. But I feel like this was like a really good silver lining that Raimi came back and was able to direct and do this. So yeah, I really want him returning. I don't know if it'll include like Wanda stuff, but it is interesting that they have introduced like sorcerers and they've also introduced the witches stuff. I don't know if they're going to continue to. I assume they'll combine them in like a next Doctor Strange movie. As for what's next for Doctor Strange, I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with him, like possibly being corrupted by the Darkhold, having that third eye. And I was somebody who was not familiar who if that was in the mid-credit scene. Like I was like, oh cool, Charlize Theron. Who's she playing? So it's been good trying to, I don't know, but you guys know your stuff more than I do. After this, they do this credit scenes, I'm like Googling, like, okay, who is this? And then you see like who they are within the MCU, and you're like, oh, that could be really interesting. And then you get kind of excited about what they're going to do with her. Like all that dark dimension stuff sounds awesome. I think when she just tore that down and was like, yeah, and we're going to fix this. I'm like, cool, that's awesome.
And he's like, hell yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't know who she was. I'm like, all right, I'm ready. So yeah, I hope they bring Raimi back and go more into that cool imagery. You know, I feel like that's why I really like Doctor Strange stuff. It's just incredible imagery. And Raimi's really good at doing that stuff. And yeah, as for him in the Dark Universe, or sorry, in the MCU, I don't know where they're going to go next. Like if he's going to stick around in other films, or if they're going to say, oh, he's gone missing. He's off in the Dark Universe somewhere.
So when you mention he's gone missing, do you mean Dan's camera? Oh, Dan, you didn't go to the dark dimension.
He only popped over for a cup of tea.
You went to the dark dimension where capitalism is beloved by you. Elon Musk, crypto NFTs, buyout.
He's got a goatee. Yeah.
It's not even a goatee.
No, you've I got a goatee. Sorry, I'm not having that in the record.
It's what is it, like whatever hipsterish thing from like Silicon Valley, like whatever he's rocking that. Like, yeah,
pencil mustache.
Yeah. I'll hand it over to possibly alternate universe Dan for his thoughts on where he'd want Doctor Strange to go.
Yes.
So agreed that I want Elfman and Raimi back. That would be phenomenal. I seen a really interesting. I can't take credit for this. I seen it on, I think, Reddit. Someone said it would be really interesting. So the character that Charlie Theron is playing, I can't recall her name right now. What's the name of the character again?
Clea,
thank you. Clea is Dormammu's niece in the comic. So the idea that in the Dark Dimension, that is actually an alternate reality where Doctor Strange is Dormammu. So the Doctor Strange of that dimension became Dormammu. I suppose that should be kind of weird because then if they're going to be a couple, then he's her uncle. I never thought of that, but disregard that.
Disney Plus spin-off show right there. I think that would be incredible.
That's more Game of Thrones than Disney, but yeah. That would be quite an interesting spin, but yeah, I'd like to see Dormammu again. Put it that way. He's such a big character in the comic, and we've only really seen him in the very end of that first movie. So I would like to see him return. And obviously, Dr. Benedict Cumberbatch also does the CGI motion capture and I believe the voice as well for Dormammu. So yeah, I want to see him back, and especially if I go to Dark Dimension. And yeah, I'd love to see Elfman and Raimi back. So I'm excited to see where it goes. The one nitpick I had with that last scene. The movie obviously ends with that third eye opening, and he's in a lot of pain and he's screaming on the street. And then we get a short mid-credit sequence, and then all of a sudden, when Charlie Theron appears, he opens the eye as if he's had it for ages, and he's like, "Okay, let's go." And that again just felt a bit condensed. I feel like there could be a wee bit more expansion there of him dealing with this third eye that just appeared in his head, whereas it was literally a couple of minutes of a mid-credit sequence, and then he can just use it. I was like, okay. Also, I would just like to touch on, although the CGI through the whole movie was phenomenal, it was a very visually stimulating film, that third eye looked a bit rough. There was just certain scenes where especially on Evil Strange, I noticed, somewhat on Our Strange as well, but just when that eye opened, it just looked a bit cartoony and a bit superimposed. But other than that, I thought it was a phenomenal looking film. It was just that one wee nitpick. But yeah, it's an exciting post-credit sequence. What I was quite looking forward to going in, I had no idea what the post-credits for this movie would be. Usually I've got a few predictions of what they could do with the post-credits, whereas this time I genuinely didn't know. So it was nice to have a kind of fresh introduction of a new character, an actress that we obviously all know and like, enjoy, and just there's potential for where they can go with her.
Exactly. And I think one thing, well, it's not really... It's two things, but it's not about Doctor Strange. I hope we do. You mentioned like jokingly, but not really as a joke, like a Wanda Disney Plus show, and I was like, yeah, I want a Wanda Disney Plus show now. And two, I feel like they're building up to Young Avengers, and with Jessica, no, not your Jessica. I don't know why. Maybe because we recorded like 2 podcasts in a row. Like my brain is turning to like mush.
We've recorded 2 curse podcasts. It's okay.
It's like
this is my 4th podcast of the day.
Poor Dan. He spent his entire day podcasting. It is 9:20 at night here in the UK.
I've never seen.
I started at 12 o'clock.
He has
I
done a
never
full
seen like
shift.
your like background because it's probably night for you, Jessica. It's usually like, oh, I see like the sunlight, and I'm like, wow, today is Mother's Day, and I was like, mom, I just had brunch with her. I'm like, mom, I'm like, bye, mom, and I'll be like, oh, wasted the whole day. Okay, not waste, but you know what I mean. Anyway,
Well, we
I
didn't
was
want the car crash elements, but yeah.
yeah, it was. What am I trying to say? Young Justice. I feel Young Justice, Young Avengers. Jesus. Young Justice is an awesome show on HBO Max. Binge that. But Young Avengers, I feel like they've been building that up. I feel like definitely Kate Bishop. I would love to see her on Young Avengers. But with
Yeah, same.
America Chavez, that's what I was saying. Like I keep saying, wanting to say Jessica Chastain.
Jessica Chastain is America Chavez.
I don't know why. I don't know.
That's okay. That's okay. In an alternate universe, what was it? Rachel McPherson is playing Christine, and I can't even remember her name. Jessica Chastain is playing America Chavez in a very controversial film. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, instead of like the H1 controversy with Tilda Swinton, they're like, this like teenager is now played by a mid 30s, I believe, white woman. Yeah, why not? It's
they're
like
going all in on the controversy.
the thing is like our multiverse. It's like, what other casting controversies can they do? It's like, who is getting canceled in alternate timelines? What if we become, as in, where was my point in all this? Kate Bishop,
Young
um,
Avengers, America Chavez.
exactly. Like her ending with like her training. It's like, okay, she's still in 616. Like maybe she can wake up. Who knows? And I can't even say anything more because I'll be like, blah, 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 blah. Daniel, you got anything to add?
No, I don't know if there's anything else left to say. I really enjoyed this film. I hope Sam Raimi comes back. I was so pleasantly surprised at how deep they went into the horror in the film, and there was two issues I had when I came out the film. When I first, if we're going to go into ratings, when I first came out the film, I was at about an 8 out of 10, simply because I felt it was a bit condensed. It was a bit. I wouldn't even say it was rushed. It didn't feel rushed. That's the wrong word, but it just felt like it could do with some breathing room throughout the whole length of it, and that knocked a point off for me. The second thing that knocked a point off for me was the cinematography. There was, although I loved all the cinematography for different reasons, I found it quite jarring that they went from this kind of vast, grandiose, typical of the MCU cinematography, where you're seeing these vast landscapes and these kind of beautiful shots, wide angles, and a good shot composition and good shot balance, etc. And then it would kind of go from that to these really, like we're saying, like Christine Palmer fight with the camera, and just certain, and like after Wanda gets possessed by evil Wanda, she looks directly at the barrel of the lens. There's just certain moments like that that felt way more like a low budget horror film. And at first I found it jarring. Like, I like both for different reasons, because I like low budget horror and I like Marvel, big MCU cinematography, and I like beautiful cinematography in anything. But I just felt like there was a bit of a disconnect there. But it was actually Mother Half Courtney, when we were talking about it, she pointed out that that was possibly intentional. I like to think, maybe we're giving them too much credit, but I like to think that they want you to feel a bit off when you're watching this movie, and that's why they chose to go with that kind of jarring change between like these kind of wide angle, beautiful landscape shots to these close up, visceral kind of horror, not cheap, but low budget shots, and that the kind of uncomfortableness and unease that you feel watching that is intentional. I don't know if it was or not, but that was enough for me to add a point back on. So that's why I'm at a 9 out of 10 at this point.
Jessica, what's your score?
I'd give this like I don't know how you guys review things, but I've never reviewed anything a 10. It takes a lot for me to review a 9. Like, I absolutely loved Scream 5, the Scream reboot, and I give it a 9. Like, that is such a good score for such a good film. I feel like it implemented nearly everything perfectly. I'd say the same with this, but it would be an 8.5 for me. It doesn't quite reach those heights, but 8.5 is a fantastic score. And for an MCU movie, I feel like they kind of always sit around a 7 or a 7.5 with me. Like, it takes something really good for me to want to go back and watch it. Like, I liked Shang-Chi, I liked Black Widow. I've liked a lot of them. They go on Disney Plus, so I don't really rewatch them again. Hell yeah, am I watching this again as soon as it hits Disney Plus. Such a fun film, not without a couple of faults, but highly recommended for me. So yeah, 8.5 out of 10 for me.
I mean, for me, I'm giving it a solid 9. And I'm like, it's the same way. Like, I don't give stuff 10, except for Midnight Mass and the Batman. But yet again, like, yes, Marvel movies for me, and every review is valid. Okay, most reviews are valid. I mean, if you base it on like, well, I didn't like it because this was a different, it wasn't white and it was a woman. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
bye. But it's like, I get some people like, hey, it was too Raimi. I know some people were disappointed in the cameos. I understand that, but me, we got the right amount of cameos. The story, yes, was weak, but it allowed a lot more of Sam Raimi to fill the you tone down the story, and that is a bit of a problem. But more Raimi, I'm fine with that.
agreed.
I'll accept that loss because it's a win. So I'm giving it a 9, and I would elaborate more, but you can read my review on KeenGamer.com. Oh, when I post it. Okay, it'll be up when this podcast goes up, unless Jessica's like, "Yep, it's going straight to the website."
Oh no, it's gonna
Nope.
take me a while to edit these 2 podcasts.
Yeah, it's I don't know who angered which with technical problems, but that's the internet. All right, I think that wraps up. I think that wraps up for me. Do you guys want to add anything else?
I don't think so. I bet you when we finish, they're gonna be like, "Oh, we forgot to talk about that. Oh, we forgot to talk about that." But it's
I hate
difficult
that
when,
feeling.
yeah, you watch a film in the cinema and like you can't just rewatch it on like TV or something. So, I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff I'm missing. Like Dan mentioned, I really loved that scene where his like the Deadite type things are going into Doctor Strange. Like, so cool, amazing imagery. We'll be watching it again when it comes on the Disney Plus.
All I'll say is I've been talking about this film now for 4 hours today, and I still feel like there's stuff that I've probably missed. So
Yeah.
I genuinely think that kind of sums up this movie. There's so much to talk about, and it was a phenomenal time in the cinema, and it was a brilliant entry into the MCU, and it was somewhat of a bold step for the MCU. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well.
All right. Well, that wraps up our Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Even though we were going mad, that was a big twist.
Yeah, the internet went crazy.
The internet went crazy. We're loopy. Jessica, it's night for you. What is time? And Daniel loves corporations. Okay, alternate Daniel.
Daniel grew a
Yeah.
goatee.
Don't put those words in my mouth.
That's why I had to backtrack. I'm like, no. I got to clarify it. But thank you so much for listening. We hope you guys had a great time. Check us out on KeenGamer.com. We got lots of articles from a lot of talented people, including this panel right here. Jessica, where can the people find you?
You can find me at Resi Jessie on Twitter, and I have a new. If you like horror films, if you like Doctor Strange, I have a new article up of the biggest horror films coming out in April this year, and Doctor Strange was on it, and there's a couple of indies in there too.
Do you mean May?
Yeah, I do mean May.
I was
I
like,
have-
April.
I
I'm
have
like,
ju-
what is time?
I have jumped back in an alternate universe where it is April 2022. But I also have a guide up for, not a guide, Jesus Christ, just end the podcast. Dan, what have you got
Bye,
coming
guys. Well, honestly, Jessica, check out her work, and honestly, I hope you do review the Black Phone because I'm really excited for that. And this is what, like, if that movie is great, then that is like the perfect payoff. Like, I know he
Mhm.
really wanted to direct that, make it his own thing. So awesome. Daniel, where can people find you?
Well, it's a wee bit confusing, but if you go to the Pop Shop Podcast on YouTube or Spotify or any good podcast services, we actually have a spin-off podcast that gets uploaded on the same channel, called For Our Consideration, which me and my other half going to do. And it is somewhat of a film podcast. We pick a different film every week or a different film series. Jessica mentioned the Scream movies earlier. The most recent episode that is up is a retrospective of the 5 Scream movies. So if you're into horror and Scream, we've got an episode on that. There's also an episode on Alien 1 and 2, and yeah, different films. So yeah, there's also gaming episodes, comic episodes. The gamut of pop culture gets covered. So go and check out Pop Shop Podcast for all that.
I can't wait for the Smurfs episodes. Love the Smurfs. That's such a weird thing to end on. And that's saying something for me. Guys, thank you so much. I'm your host, Mark Callahan. Go see Doctor Strange 2, and we hope you have a great day. Bye.
Good luck.